Good evening, everybody. I am Vishal Gupta, and I am the chairperson of the Ashank Desai Center for Leadership and Organization Development at IIM Ahmedabad. The Ashank Desai Center for Leadership and Organization Development started its operations this June 2021. The center has been created with an aim to provide a platform where academicians, practitioners, and various organizations, business, governmental, non-governmental organizations can come together, exchange thoughts and ideas, and deliberate on leadership and organization challenges that are being faced by organizations of our country. The center provides an opportunity as well as a platform to drive research as well as discussions on various themes of leadership development in various kinds of organizations, such as knowledge organizations, high-tech organizations, public sector organizations, social sector organizations, legal and regulatory organizations, among many others. We at the center are creating opportunities, events, whereby we can bring in eminent personalities who can come and address the audience at the institute as well as outside and share with us the insights that they have garnered over extensive years of research, training, and consulting with various organizations. In this series, we are very happy to announce that we are launching the IIMA Leadership Lecture Series, whereby we would aim to bring in an eminent personality who would come and share their rich insights about leadership and also point us to some issues as well as directions in which leadership research and leadership training should move in the years to come. It is a pleasure that we have Dr. TV Rao with us, who is going to deliver the inaugural IIMA Leadership Lecture today. Well, Professor Rao is a distinguished faculty trainer, researcher, and consultant who needs no introduction. He is also very popularly known as the father of Indian HRD movement. I have the honor and privilege to introduce Dr. Rao to you all. It is a great pleasure to state that Dr. Rao was at the Indian Institute of Management for about 20 years before he left the institute and started his very popular organization that he drives today, which is called as the TVRLS. He is currently the chairman of TV Rao Learning Systems. He was, as I mentioned, the professor at Indian Institute of Management for over 20 years, beginning 1973. He left the institute in 1994 and served as the honorary director of the Academy of Human Resources Development for 2 years. He then set up TVRLS in 1996, 2 years after he left IIMA. He continued his association with the institute and served as a visiting professor and then adjunct professor at IIMA till about 2014. He also served on the board of the institute from 2014 to 2018. Professor Rao and Dr. Uday Pari have been credited to initiate a human resource development movement in the country. Well, their work started in 1974 as a review exercise of the performance appraisal system for Larsen and Toubro, which eventually led to the creation of the Human Resources Development Function. Dr. Rao and Dr. Parikh were instrumental in making L&T the first company in this part of the world to have a fully dedicated HRD department. Professor Rao also served at ADCLOD as the chair professor in Human Resource Management, and along with Father E. Abraham of ADCLOD, conceptualized a professional body which was later registered as the National HRD Network. I'm sure a lot of you would be familiar with how the National HRD network has grown today, and it is a body that is recognized all over the country as well as around the world as a apex body of HR professionals. Dr. Rao became the founder president of the National HRD network and was also the president of the Indian Society for Applied Behavioral Sciences from 1986 to 1989. Over the last 3 decades, Dr. Rao has been popularizing a methodology of developing leadership through feedback by known people, which he started working on in mid 1980s when he was here at IIMA. This methodology later came to be popularly known as 360-degree feedback and has been talked about and written about a lot in various textbooks as well as practitioner journals. To popularize this methodology as a developmental tool, he has also held many workshops in the last 30 years in India as well as other parts of the world. This is also going to be the theme of the talk that he's going to give today, which is titled Hearing the Unheard, Leadership Development Through Feedback. Well, Dr. Rao has an extensive consulting career and he has consulted reputed organizations such as USAID, UNESCO, UNICEF, Commonwealth Secretariat, World Bank, and so on. He has also been working with various organizations around the world. He has more than 60 books which he has authored, co-authored, or edited in various domains of various themes of HRD, health, management, entrepreneurship, and many others. Dr. Rao is truly a world-class scholar, and it is a great privilege to have him with us today. Dr. Rao, thank you for accepting our invitation to deliver this inaugural address, and we look forward to hearing you. Over to you, Dr. Rao.
Thank you, Vishal. I certainly didn't expect this long an introduction from a colleague like you. It has been a pleasure working with you, Vishal. I think we had a few years together, taught the first year. I thoroughly enjoyed the hard work you have put in, and also reading your latest 2 books on leadership. Both, I think the one which you have written on Treat and with Asha Kaul, bringing us back to the scriptures and so on. I want to begin by congratulating IIM for starting this center, Ashank Desai Center. It's wonderful. I also must congratulate Ashank for the great thoughts that he has had. We served the institute on the board together for quite some time. And it is nice of Ashank, and Ashank, I think, happened to be also in my class long, long ago. And now our students become our teachers. There is so much to learn from them. And when I talk of leadership lessons, I think the lessons are also drawn from those of students who later, I think, became quite a few role models and so on.
Professor Rao, if you can bring the microphone a little closer, it may be.
Yeah, is this better?
Yes, this is better. Yes.
Is this better? Yeah.
Yes.
Keep telling me if I'm not audible or anything. Well, there are a large number of people who may be there, so for their sake, I would certainly like this feedback. So thanks a lot, Vishal. It's wonderful. I'm quite excited to be here and to give the first talk on Ashank Desai Center on Hearing the Unheard. What I'm going to do is to first share a few of the experiences of leadership development I had with some CEOs. If I really look at since the time 1986, when we started the first leadership styles and organizational development, organizational excellence, I think that is how we titled the program in 1986 at IIM Ahmedabad. And now, almost about 35 years, I have had the privilege and also pleasure of interacting with a large number of CEOs who used 360-degree feedback. When we started, the term 360 feedback was not available. I'll tell at some point of time the story of how we actually invented practically this particular methodology But first, let me share with the participants and those of you who are listening to us uh, at least 4 stories. I have many stories, but I'll start with 4 stories of CEOs who went through 360-degree feedback and found it useful and developed. That is the first part of my talk. After that, I will go on to a little theoretical considerations and quickly go to talk about what are the influences, how we came upon this particular idea of what is now called as 360-degree feedback. Then I will share some research findings, and I'll also talk about what is the way forward in terms of using this methodology for leadership or development. I want to start with my experience of uh, the first experience of a CEO of a company. Can you see the screen?
Yes, we can see
Okay,
the screen.
wonderful.
Yes.
The first CEO I'm talking about, it's not in sequence. These events have occurred at different parts of the time. This is the case of a director of finance of a company who became director of finance at a very young age. I think he was at the time he went through 360, he was something like 36, 37 years. This was about a decade and a half ago. In those days, to become director of finance at 37, 38 years is very, very unusual. He's considered to be functionally excellent, very good CH, chartered accountant in background. Uh, and every 2 years, he got promoted in his particular company and considered by the chairman as the person who contributed a lot to the top line and bottom line of the company. Interpersonally competent, very sincere. And he worked, like the other day, I heard somebody saying, I work 10 days a week. So he's one of those who probably would have worked 10 days a week. Uh, that means I think he was all the time at his desk. But the only unfortunate thing with this particular person was that nobody liked working with him. His leadership style was considered to be critical. He is so meticulous, no mistake will escape his attention. And when we found any mistake, he would lose his cool and shout at people and things like that. So as a result, I think the CHRO had a lot of difficulty. Every time he posted people, people were leaving his department. So once he suggested to this director of finance, sir, why don't you, there is something like this feedback from known people. Those days, I think we just began to use the term 360 feedback. Sir, you are such a efficient and effective person. If only you can get some feedback, I think it will make you more effective. Apparently, the director of finance shouted back at the CHRO and told him, in the last 2 years, how many people did you post in my department? And when he replied some number, he said, how many of them are still here? So there is a good attrition. If you're posting people and they are leaving, then you look at my record. Do you think I should go through 360 or you should go through 360? The CHRO didn't know what to do with that, but somehow I think he got back to me. We worked out some kind of a mechanism. And finally, when the CHRO convinced him, the director of finance attended a program not meant for his company, but an open program which we were doing at the time. And he came for the program and got the feedback. Normally, when we give the feedback only on the second day. First day, we spend explaining the tools we have used. For example, we use a tool in which we talk of various activities, then a tool on leadership styles, and how much you delegate, and some of the qualities. When he received his feedback, he saw a few positive things, but he didn't pay attention to those positive things, like you're very sincere, hardworking, you are excellent functionally, etc., etc. He forgot all of them and went on to the focused his attention on the negative one. He said that, look, it looks that people don't like working with me. They call me short-tempered. They say that I am not at all, I'm too formal and so on. And these are the kind of people HR is posting in my department. What else can we expect from these people? That's the kind of a thing that but this was on the second day. But by the time of third day, at the end of the day, as the program was closing, he came to me and he said, Professor Rao, I've interacted with some 23 others in this batch last 3 days. Sir, to tell you frankly, some of them are nowhere near the kind of knowledge I have. and the kind of understanding I have about business. But when I look at the kind of 360 feedback, as a part of the program, they shared with each other because they were all strangers to each other, their feedback. So the director of finance told me, if I look at the feedback they got, they all managed great feedback. I mean, this is the term that he used. They managed good feedback. So, Professor, I started wondering somewhere if I am not doing enough to get people to think positively about all the good things that I am doing. That's all. That's the only comment which left me some hope. And 6 months later, this company invited me to visit their campus and do 360 for the entire top team. And then they gave a party and said that we don't know what magic we have done. This is a change in director of finance we have. I asked them, what is the kind of change that you find? They said, most important thing we find in him, he smiles. He was not even smiling earlier. He smiles. Not only that, nowadays, when we wish him in the morning, he stops for a while, wishes us back, and sometimes even has a cup of tea. So he has become quite informal. And I think we are beginning to enjoy working with him. That is why we wanted other people also to be exposed. Of course, in a lighter way, I did ask them one thing. Is there anything that we have seen him not change? They said, yes, one thing he still continues to do, that is throwing papers at us. Sometimes he calls us and offers us a cup of tea, has a chat, but when he gets angry, I think along with tea, he also throws papers. I think the lesson that I drew from this is it only needs some kind of a feedback, and people get the feedback at the right time. I think they can bring phenomenal amount of change in their own behavior. So some effective people are not sure of some of the weak points they have. They are just waiting to be told of weakness. That is what I have said. Hearing the unheard, if you create a situation where they can hear what they have not heard before, even if at some point of time it is uncomfortable for them, I think they will bring quite a lot of change for the benefit of the organization. The second case is a very interesting case of the Pharma CEO. When we did the 360-degree feedback for him, there were many things. I'm not going into the details, but some of the positive things that he got was, you are a strategic thinker. You are a role model. You are very entrepreneurial. You think ahead of others. You are so wonderful to work with you. But they also said you are impatient. You are irritable, short-tempered, and you don't communicate enough. So I think there are many other things, but these are the highlights. So he walked out. Normally at the end of a 360 feedback or a leadership development program, we want people to write on a piece of paper, what have you learned? How do you want to leverage your strong points? What are the areas where you want to improve on? So he decided that he wants to multiply his strategic and entrepreneurial thinking. So the strategy he worked out was that he will have 3 executive assistants in addition to the one which is permanently with him. And these 3 will be MBAs. Each one of them will work with him for 6 months. And after that, he will post them in some of the units where other GMs are working. So he recruited people and gave them opportunity to observe him in action. So later 6 months, you can imagine, I think slowly, one by one, across about 3 to 4 year period, a large number of people who worked with the CEO understood his entrepreneurial thinking, strategic way he approaches things, spread the competence. I don't want to say it is 100% spread, but at least they know the way the CEO thinks, and it impacted the other unit heads and so on. On communication skills, he appointed a coach, and he worked with the coach on communicating. He started giving talks, opened himself to magazines and so on. On the temper part of it, he wanted to work on it. He wanted to be more patient. But at the end of it, after a few months when I met him, he said, Professor, I made some changes, but on one issue, I decided I should not change. That is becoming patient. It suddenly dawned on to me, if I become patient, there is nobody in this company who is going to take this company forward. I think it is need to be. Sometimes, entrepreneurial thinking goes with high vision, ambition, and becoming impatient and so on. He said, this is one quality on which I am not going to give up now. I will continue to probably be impatient to take this company forward. The company has done well, and today it continues to do well, going from higher and higher. So the lesson that I draw from this particular Pharma CEO is you leverage your strengths, you multiply so that you can make a good leadership impact. And if there are areas where you discover that you should probably need not change, not everything you have to do according to the wishes of those people who assess you, so you may have to let go. This is not the only case. I've come across a few other cases where the CEO has decided, I will work on a number of other things, but when it comes to irritability and impatience, I am afraid I may not be fully wanting to change myself. I certainly want to be less irritable, but I don't want to be more patient, because most people who work with me, the problem with them is that they are too patient and they keep on waiting and waiting. So this is an important kind of a thing. Sometimes you may have to let things go, but I think the most important lesson is to leverage your strong points. In fact, today in all of our 360-degree feedback, we start by saying this is meant to help you to discover your strengths and multiply your strengths. Weaknesses will be taken care of. Don't worry too much about the weaknesses. There is no one who doesn't have weakness. Everyone has weaknesses. I think you need to be just aware of it. Not only that, we also tell people that what is a weakness today could become a strength tomorrow. I'll come to a story which I have put on the on both Facebook and LinkedIn about a CEO about whom I'll talk only at the end, not now. I think that was a great story of continuing to be irritable and still taking the company along. This is not to say that irritability is a virtue, but I think sometimes you probably have to let go. There is a third case of a very interesting case of a leader who is an introverted leader. He is one who came for one of these IIM programs in early 90s, late 80s. And he was rated as a visionary. And he was also told, you are a visionary, but you need to be better in decision making. You should delegate more. You are very kind-hearted. Kind-heartedness beyond a point is going to make people take you for granted. So become more assertive. Continue to be kind-hearted, become more assertive. This is the feedback that he has got. He found it very difficult to, he said, I agree. Everyone tells me that I am kind-hearted, I am not assertive, but I find it so difficult. However, I'm going to try this. Now, I didn't know what happened. I was doing an organization development work for this company. 10 years later, I happened to visit him. And casually, I asked him, sir, do you remember the 360 feedback that you got? And I remembered the kind of feedback that he got. He immediately pulled out a piece of paper from his drawer and he said, Professor Rao, this is the feedback. Last 1 decade, I've been keeping this feedback. Every time I go for an important meeting, I go through the feedback and I decide I am going to be more assertive in this meeting. But Professor, let me tell you, till today, I still have not been able to come to increase my assertiveness to a level where I can say I have succeeded, but I won't stop reading. I think this is an interesting lesson that some people may find it difficult, but at least appreciate the effort. Even if somebody says that, look, I'm trying, I may not come up to the expectations of everyone, but it's fine, I'm trying. So I think this is a good lesson. This is not the only thing that happened with the gentleman. Many positive things happened with him. I'm not talking about all those, but this is an important lesson that I have drawn to say that you always should continue to work on whatever you can change. The fourth story is a story from another country, our neighboring country. This is a family-owned business which is run by 4 family directors, family people as directors, and 4 professional directors. There were a total of 8 people who were running different units of this particular company. When we did the 360-degree feedback for him, the CEO was rated, the eldest of the lot, the CEO with the elderly gentleman, was rated as risk averse. He was rated as perceptive. He depended on a few people. He is modest, value-driven, entrepreneurial. The company was running because of him. The company expanded, went to places, and he had a lot of ambitions and so on. But I think other things are true. One of his youngest of the brothers, the director, is called Director New Initiatives. He was put in charge of training and development. He's considered in the 360 feedback, he's got a rating as theoretical, academic, well-read. He's a man of ideas, but not very practical and so on. The third director is number 3 in the order. He was in charge of pharmaceuticals and a number of other related businesses. He got assessed as is a risk taker. He's good public relations person, extravagant, extrovert. He's very well networked. And in pharma, with all these qualities, he was able to manage about 50% market share. And the fourth director in charge of hotels and tours, he was assessed as introverted, does not delegate, more of a theory X type, risk averse, and he was able to manage only 1% market share. When I was coaching the CEO, and the CEO generally asked me, well, how do you find? I mentioned to him, I can't reveal the data. I mentioned to him, it may be a good idea for all 4 of you to get together, share your data, and see how you match or mismatch. I think he carried this along with this particular suggestion out. And one of the outcomes of this discussion was that the director who is in charge of pharma should be in charge of hotels, because he is a more of a risk taker and extroverted, that suits hotels and tours, whereas the introverted person who is in charge of hotels and tours is not able to get more than 1% of market share because he's not well networked and so on. This is just one change, but a number of other shuffling they have done, reshuffling and shuffling, including the reshuffling of the directors, all done in a workshop. Everyone agreeing to it and becoming a party to this whole thing. A result of this particular business prospered. At least people started feeling, I don't want to say 100% happier, little more happier than before, because they felt now they got the kind of business they want to be in. Now, these are just about 4 cases I wanted to say. In all these, I think there are phenomenal improvements that have come up. And the lesson that I would draw from all this is, number 1, leadership can be developed. And number 2, sometimes people are waiting to hear the unheard, not from one source, maybe many sources. When they hear the unheard from different sources, it provokes them, it gets them to discover where they need to focus on. And that is what is likely to help them to improve and make a better kind of an impact. At this point of time, I just want to play a short video clip and then leave some time for discussion on if any questions or anything is there to be asked. I hope you can see this.
How does the
Can you hear
leader
now?
train
Yes,
himself?
yes, we can hear.
How does he groom himself for scaling? Vision is fine, but how do I train myself? What do I do? So what did you do to yourself? Nayan Murthy of a startup to a billion-dollar corporation.
First of all, the biggest instrument for improvement for leaders is feedback. Most leaders who failed in the world failed because they cut off the feedback channels. They allowed only positive signals to come to them. Whether it was Mrs. Indira Gandhi, whether it was Richard Nixon, whether it is Robert Mugabe today in Zimbabwe, every one of these people, they cut off the feedback channel. Therefore, you have to create an environment where people give honest feedback. And if you use that feedback, when you sit alone, alone, and reflect on it, I think there is an opportunity for everybody to improve.
I think this is the most important point. Give an opportunity to get feedback and reflect on it. That is likely to improve. I would stop here. Vishal, any quick questions? Maybe I think
Yes.
we'll give a few
Yes,
minutes.
Professor. Yeah, Dr. Rao, there is a question by Deepen, and Deepen asks, what does organization do when the feedback is not received well, but misinterpreted? And that's a very important question when people may take it negatively also, or maybe they misinterpret the feedback.
I think my answer to this will be, the mistake is in terms of not preparing the person adequately to receive feedback. This happens when you have, first of all, when you have not prepared emotionally the person to receive. Like in this case, this particular person, Director of Finance, I mentioned to you, on the first day, as soon as he told the HR person, you need to go for a 360 feedback, I don't need. But finally, when he convinced him, because also the way he convinced him was very interesting. He told the Director of Finance, our chairman is himself at some point of time thinking of going through, why can't he go through? So he said, if the chairman is thinking, I will go through. So he went through that. And on the first day when he got the feedback, he was very critical of all the people. I told my CHRO that I am not the one who needs this feedback. It is these people who I think give me the feedback and so on. So this defensiveness comes because you are not emotionally prepared, number one. And number two, I think this is an important point that in all our 360 feedback we have made, that the feedback is to be shared only with the person concerned, and it should be anonymous. Nobody should write his or her name. In fact, I think we only give averages and we give edited kind of comments, and we ask the person to think about it and so on. So this happens only because of inadequate preparation. But if at the end of the preparation, even the person says, I don't agree with this, I think let it be, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really mean the person really does not agree. I've seen several cases where people after some time came back, Professor, I think there is a point. Because feedback sensitizes the person. And when you are sensitized, I think all our human beings are normally, I mean, who wants to receive negative feedback, Vishal? Everyone would want to receive positive feedback. It's normal to be defensive. I don't get upset with it. I said, it doesn't matter. And another thing we mentioned in 360 feedback is, if you don't accept, don't accept. It really, in fact, my colleague keeps on quoting Gautam Buddha when he used to go for alms. And when he went to one particular house, the lady started abusing him, and he said that just get lost, don't even come, etc., etc. He returned with a smile and blessed that woman. When he was asked, he said, all that person has told me, I left at the door itself. I have not received any of those. So if you don't like negative feedback, don't receive it. It is your choice. That is what we say. I hope that is of some.
Yeah, I think we are getting a lot of questions and comments, and the recurrent theme is, how do we prepare people to actually accept the feedback? So I think that's the difficult question here, and which you mentioned, well, if they don't accept, we let it be, and maybe they will get sensitized to the feedback and they'll think about it later. That is.
I'll tell you my own story, Vishal, what happened after I left IIM and started the Academy of HRD as honorary director, because I'm one of the main trustees, therefore I can't be on salary, so I had to be only an honorary director. 3 years after that, I took feedback, and to my surprise, I think I was rated as inconsistent, unreliable, biased, and I had a few sleepless nights. I said, this is not the self-image I have. This is totally different. But what it has done to me is that every time I interacted with my colleagues in TVRLS later, I started thinking, now I made this statement, what is the impact they have made? Then I suddenly realized that I have a knack of consulting everyone individually and building on ideas of each person without acknowledging the previous fellow. As a result, my final product was always different than what each individual gave. Now that was it took quite a few months for me to realize it. That was a big realization. I changed my strategy. I used it to then call them all together and pick up ideas and so on. So I think it takes time. I mean, there are many things I would strongly recommend people to read my book on the power of 360 feedback. That is one of the reasons why we wrote in all details. Never use the feedback for administrative purposes, because that is the first damage you will be doing to the very cause of 360-degree feedback. It doesn't build leaders. It destroys whatever leadership qualities you have. So we make it a point to tell companies, do not ask for feedback of individuals, but you are most welcome to ask each individual after he or she has gone through the feedback to present an action plan. What is your action plan? What have you learned? That you have a right to ask, but don't ask them, because feedback is subjective. And there is no guarantee that all those people who give feedback will say the same thing and so on. I think this takes care of many questions. I'll quickly go on to the very important concept behind 360-degree feedback, which most of your audience would know, was Johari Window, which says there are 4 parts of our talent, which I think in IIM we have been teaching for the last 50 and odd years. A part of it which is known to you, and a part which is also known to others, which is your open self. A part of it is known to you only, but not known to others, hidden self. And there is a part with others see which you don't know, which is your blind self. And the 4th one, undiscovered. The most important contribution of 360-degree feedback is when you seek feedback, you get to know how much of what you know is shared by others, and how much of what others know is known to you. And of course, you never get to know the undiscovered part of it. I mean, this is what the 360-degree feedback is. This is a feedback you have sought from a variety of people. And we also include family. Yes. I have not put here in this diagram family. Nowadays, many people started asking, can I also ask my family members to give? I say, yes, you can create a. So it is a feedback from those who interact with you. That's why at one point of time, before we came across the term 360, we called it feedback from known people. The reporting manager who works with you, reviewing manager, if he knows you, direct report is internal customers. I think this is a standard kind of a thing. And where most people goof is in terms of trying to reveal the names indirectly. I know of a company which has made a total mess of this, and the mess has been made by the chairman and managing director of that company. He asked the HR to conduct 360. HR conducted 360, but they gave to each individual feedback, anonymous feedback only. 3 of your colleagues have rated you like this: colleague 1 this, colleague 2 this, colleague 3 this. Your juniors rated you this: junior 1, junior 2, junior 3. I think that was enough for the persons to try to guess who is that colleague who gave all on a 5-point scale 1, 1, 1. Even when a colleague of him has not rated him, he assumed that this particular person who didn't get along well with him rated. And it created massive interpersonal conflict in this particular company. Until the CMD asked me, Professor Rao, somewhere we seem to have made a mistake. Please come and review. Are we doing things right? So I had to tell them to actually abandon for some time, let things cool down, because it has created a lot of interpersonal issues. People started fighting by guessing who has said it. That's a wrong thing to do. You never give feedback by individualizing and saying, whosoever it is anonymous, but colleague 1, colleague 2, colleague 3. I think this is these are the kind of things that could damage the entire concept of 360-degree feedback and so on. I want to go on to this little thing, Vishal, if that is okay with you, unless you have any other question, because this might clarify a number of things. How did we strike on this? What is now called by Americans and others as 360-degree feedback. I must tell you this little story. The story goes back to 50 years ago when Uday Parikh and I, in the year 1969-70, had a ICMR project. ICMR nowadays is very familiar with everyone. You will all the time see on the television the director ICMR coming and talking about giving guidance and things like that. ICMR project, the project was motivation training for mental health. That is the project. This studied the mental health of children. Mental health was defined as taking initiative, being creative, liking the school, liking the teachers, responding to frustrating situations in positive ways and so on. And we used a technique called classroom interaction analysis. We observed 50 primary school teachers, and I'm sure you will all appreciate primary school teachers are normally single teacher classrooms. That means almost for about 6 to 7 hours in a day, a child is interacting with one teacher, a Of course, today the situation may be somewhat different in some of the schools, but those days these were all single teacher classrooms in 4th and 5th standard. So imagine a child interacts with a same teacher almost for a year, 6 to 7 hours a day, and count 250 days. How much impact the teacher's personality has on the child. So we studied the teacher classroom behavior using a technique called classroom interaction analysis. The interaction analysis technique was observing every 3-second period, not 3 minute, 3-second period, the classroom behavior of the teacher. Lecturing, you put a code, lecture number 4. Questions, put a code number 5. Criticizes child, code 6. Student is talking, code 7. Accepts feelings, number 1, etc. And these behaviors were classified into directive behaviors and non-directive behaviors, indirect behaviors. So an observer used to sit at the back of the class and keep on rating the teacher across different subjects and across different days. And these 50 teachers were observed. Every hour gives about 60 minutes multiplied by every minute you give about 20 observations, about 1200 observations. I think you can see how much time it takes. So you, at the end of it, classify the teacher into a directive teacher. Those who lecture, criticize, reprimand more, they are directive teachers. Those who accept feelings, use questions, build on ideas are non-directive teachers. So we calculated what we call as ID ratios, indirect, direct ratios. You can say directive, non-directive ratios. We studied the mental health of the students, and we discovered directive teachers produced, are associated with, you can't say produced, but practically for dramatic purpose, I can say directive teachers are associated with children who didn't like to go to school, who had less initiative, who didn't manage their frustration well. And surprisingly, while there are many positives about the non-directive teachers, the negative about the non-directive teacher was, while the children there took initiative, they were good at managing frustration, liked going to school, their academic achievement was somewhat less. Whereas directive teachers had academically better students, but not liking to go to school. I think this is a very interesting kind of a thing. And that is where, Vishal, now your finding of treat leadership, where you are combining task orientation. As I said, 360 is aligned. I'll come back to that later. This is a study where we have done, where out of the 50, we called 20 teachers to a 1-week training, every day, half a day. And all that we did was gave them feedback of their classroom behavior. We taught them how to observe each other. And after we taught them, we asked them to predict their own indirect direct ratios, and then gave them actually what we observed. I hope you got the sequence right. First, we observed them and called them for a training program, taught them the technique, Flanders interaction analysis, then also shared with them the results and showed them their ID ratios. And we discovered only about 30% of the teachers could guess their direct, non-direct behavior well. 70% of them were surprised to find their classroom behavior was sometimes opposite, sometimes not the same as what we thought. But this feedback workshop did marvelous. And all that we had done was this. 6 months later, when we went and observed, we find phenomenal changes in a good number of teachers. Many of them started balancing their directive, indirective. At least the directive fellows became a little more non-directive, more accepting the feelings and so on. So this is the 1969, 70, 71 study in Delhi. Now, this is a big lesson for us. I think Uday and I were involved. We published it later in this book. You will find in the screen, Changing Teacher Behavior Through Feedback, by both of us. Number 2, I would want to go back to 1975 when I started, 1974, when I started the course on laboratory and entrepreneurial motivation. The entire lab, the way we used to conduct, myself in the beginning, later Pradeep Khandwala, was based on feedback. We give them FIRO-B, we give them PAT, we ask them to play games, we give them a risk-taking exercise and show them, are you a risk taker, why you are not a risk taker. So it is the feedback which created quite a bit of motivation in some of these students. I don't want to say every one of them has become an entrepreneur and so on, but certainly we had lovely time and some of them still remember the LAM classes. Third thing we have done was we conceptualized at IIM in all the OV courses. We use it to give 5OV. Vishal, even in the course you and I taught, even today, 45 years later, we still give instruments and we give feedback and give them the implications. So feedback is powerful. 5OB and all these tools. In addition to this, the most significant lesson that I have drawn from IIM was in 1973-74 itself, when I joined, the students used to publish a magazine. I don't know if Ashank, your time, if it was there. I noticed Ashank being there. Indian Man, a magazine in which students used to give feedback on each instructor, and this Indian Man used to be circulated also to the families. So imagine my wife getting the ratings about me on 10 different dimensions and getting compared with other professors. I don't need anything else. I don't need the director or dean to come and tell me, make yourself available more to the students and so on. It had a very powerful effect. On the top of all of this, I carried a lot of, when McClellan invited me to, that was the year when he wrote this wonderful article called Power is the Great Motivator, which talked of institutional leaders. So when I went to work with him, I was adapting this psychosocial maturity scale. I carried a lot of TAT stories from India by managers where we administer. And we were analyzing these for the way they depicted leadership styles. We concluded there are 3 leadership styles which are in the minds of Indian managers. One is a paternalistic style. Second is a critical style, which is theory X style. Third is a what we in those days called as a Ravi Matthai style or self-dispensing style or developmental style. I called it self-dispensing style. Later we changed it to the term developmental style. Now we discovered that if you are a paternalistic leader, you take care of your employees and really your relationship driven, but you create dependence. I think McClellan's article also talks about it. And if you are a critical leader, you create feelings of incompetence. And people may not learn. People work out of fear, not out of love for the job. And if you are a developmental leader, you are an empowering leader. Vishal, I think in your treat leadership, empowerment comes as a very important kind of a dimension. That's why we are saying we are very much aligned. If you are a developmental leader, then you create a interdependent climate where people like working with each other and so on. Now, this is what is a tool that I developed as soon as I returned back from working with McClellan. And I used it, I think, for your information, in Uttar Pradesh with medical doctors, primary health center doctors. And I had terrible time because normally a PhD doctor will say, Professor Rao, this is theory. It doesn't work in UP. You have to be a critical style. But once in a while, I used to come across people who said that, no, I think I agree with you. But I remember a case of a doctor where he said, Professor Rao, I followed your style and all the developmental style, but I'm almost saved myself from getting beaten up and so on. I think that is the kind of situation, late 70s, if you look at. But this is a significant impact. And this is one of the reasons why when Pradeep Khandwala, JP Singh, Ram Narayan, and I started the first program on leadership styles and organizational effectiveness, my focus was to help people to discover how much of paternalistic style they have, how much of critical style they have, and how much of developmental style they have. This is the other influence I had. And the last one I think I should talk about is the ISAPs. You mentioned while introducing me, I was also for some years president of ISAPs. Now, T group training used to be very popular in India. Even today it is popular under the name BHP and so on. But those days it was called as L groups, T groups, promoted by IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Calcutta. I think all stalwarts from across the world came and then they taught here. Now, T group is one which was called a strange group. You call a group of people for a week in a 5-star hotel, and they are strangers. They interact with each other. They use the group as a mirror. At the end of the week, you feel you are a great changed person. And I think there are a lot of studies which indicate T group really changes your interpersonal orientation. Sometimes, of course, for worse, but most often people enjoyed and they said this is good. I used to ask myself the same question. You are every day interacting with your juniors, your colleagues, your seniors, but you come to a 5-star hotel to interact with strangers. spend 1 week and they seem to have become highly reliable people and valid people for feedback. Whereas people who work with you, as your juniors who are affected by your behavior, your colleagues who are affected by behavior, they are strangers to you. This is not right. So I said we should start now a new movement of actually getting feedback from those people who work with you. That is how the entire 360 started, putting the ICMR experience, LAM experience, SOFI we conceptualized at IIM, feedback using instrument, student feedback to us. I think all these, the conceptualization is very clear that it is time that people are helped to get feedback from other sources. And if it is provocative, let it be. But if transformational change has to occur, feedback can have uh, a good kind of an impact and so on. So that is the story. So it is not copied from any American textbook. Somebody has said this is 360 feedback. In fact, I heard the term 360 feedback only after 9 years after I am Ahmedabad. And I am Ahmedabad, Pradeep, Ramnarayan, JP Singh and myself started this organizational effectiveness and managerial styles program. And when I, of course, left IIM, started TVRLS, we by now conceptualized that feedback has to be on activities, leadership activities. Activities can be changed. And styles, which is the McClelland's work, delegation becomes important. Qualities are a little difficult to change, but I think, so this is the way I think we conceptualized in early part itself. We covered, I think, many of the Tata companies we have done 360. I think Aditya Group, Birla Group is one of the most classical kind of a thing where late 90s after Santrup Mishra and Kumar, I think both of them made an excellent kind of affair. When they started doing, I think it was a little difficult, but I think they brought the change by making it totally voluntary and things like that. In public sector, Bharat at Movers, NTPC, these are all the early starters. I think we have had excellent experience with all the companies. By today, we may have covered about 25,000 people who may have been rated by about, I think, 2.5 lakh assessors. So that is the little bit of a story. This is the time where we came across this wonderful book, Extraordinary Leader. It was written, I think, almost a couple of decades ago by Zenger and Folkman. I used to use it in my talent management classes, where they studied 20,000 extraordinary leaders, all those who have gone through 360, but have used it for improving themselves, have become extraordinary leaders. And their discovery was that these people exhibited character, integrity, authenticity, ethical standards. Authenticity is again one of your variables, Vishal. So in your treat model, so I'm so happy that many things that we came across in the last 10, 15 years, your treat model, I think, takes care of. That's why I said it's fairly aligned. Personal capability, intellectual, emotional, skill makeup, and so on. They focus on results, and they had interpersonal skills and had ability to produce. I mean, this is a wonderful book. I think it is in circulation for a number of years. We still use this and so on. So this is a very interesting thing. I'll just take a couple of minutes and stop again after this for this is a little bit of research we have done. Maybe I'll stop here at this point of time. If you want to ask any questions, I will then share with you what we discovered in this study of 100 managers. Is that okay, Vishal?
Yes, yes, TV. So there is a question repeatedly asked, and so the question is, providing feedback to CXO level is very dicey, especially in family-grown businesses. How should HR manage this feedback system in these kinds of organizations, family-grown? Any advice?
Yeah, first, most important thing is do not go into this until they all, whosoever wants feedback is prepared for it. Once in one company, I burnt my fingers. Without adequate preparation, I did that, but then I actually saw in one meeting the father, son, and the eldest brother of the father fighting with each other. I think that is when I decided, if this is the kind of a thing that is happening in meetings, I my feedback is likely to create more problems. So I requested them, I collected the feedback, but I'm not going to share with you. I think scrap the thing. So please make sure that whosoever is seeking feedback, I think is ready. It is better if all of them decide to be ready as a team. But if among the team members and the family members, if one or two say that they don't think this is good and so on, I think you should leave them alone. I think it's a question of communication, convincing, and making sure that what are the insecurities they have, particularly when there are 2 or 3 generations of people in the same family, insecurities come. Sometimes the younger ones think that the old fellows don't know anything, or the old people think the younger fellows are coming up with all ideas and they are going to go against my loyal workers and so on. I think you need to be very clear, articulate. You don't need a 360 feedback to sort out things which can be otherwise sorted out by putting your maybe vision, values, your own philosophy and things like that and so on. So I would make it mandatory for people to seek feedback. I'll never give feedback in a family-owned business unless they are all ready. If some of them are ready, I think at least include those who are ready, discuss this well. And it will only be shared with the person concerned, and nobody else is going to be using this. This is an important kind of condition. Anonymity has to be understood. It has to be dealt with very high degree of sensitivity.
So there is, what I understand from you is there has to be kind of a very sound briefing.
Conscious, yes, yeah, very
yeah, they have to be briefed very clearly as to what the exercise is, what is the outcome, with whom will this feedback be shared. And so before you get into the exercise, there has to be a kind of a session that prepares people.
Yeah, not one, maybe many.
Many, yes.
And I think the tool has to be developed by them. They should use the tool which they feel comfortable, focus on the issues that are of significance to them, and so on. I think a lot of homework has to be done, because remember, 360-degree feedback can also be a provocative tool. And you don't want to spoil the business by provoking people where provocation is not required. Provocation after preparation will lead to good reflection. But if you provoke an unwanted person, it could relate to unnecessary conflict. So I would certainly be cautious.
Yep. So just a follow-up question, which is also coming up repeatedly in the questions. These kinds of feedback are typically, they can be out of context. So does that impact? So when you're asking people about feedback, in a particular context, I may be directive, but in another context, I may not be, I may be more egalitarian or paternalistic. So
yeah, there are some parts of our RSDQ model which are context free. Some are contextual, particularly the styles part of it is contextual, and we make it a point to say that your style has not only to be flexible according to the situation, it has to be flexible depending on the person. For a new recruit, you may be paternalistic, but for an indisciplined fellow, you may be critical. So on the styles, which we emphasize on the context, but on roles, these are context free to a large extent. But even there, you may say, for example, if you are saying that there's a question which says this person is highly systems driven. So if you are going to say, no, in my company, I don't need systems. If we are systems driven. So we tell the people, okay, you discuss this, if this is desirable or not. Bring context into this. But we'll find it hard to think that if you want to be a professional company, you are, but some company can say, no, in our company. So items get discussed, context get added. I totally agree that every feedback has to be interpreted in context. That is why we tell each person, you got the feedback, what you want to accept, what you want to. Somebody may say, I don't want to accept my colleagues' feedback, they are biased. I said, it's fine. My juniors have rated me well, I want to accept. Wonderful. Build on those competencies. So I find sometimes people come back and say, no, I think it's really my colleagues who are very critical. I didn't realize at that point of time. In fact, Ram has done a lot of work in ISP, Indian School of Business. he identified the ISB grades are associated more with colleagues' ratings. I mean, for a few years, he used to conduct this. In fact, his article is given in one of our books. So I think there is a lot of research there. So it has to be made contextual. Feedback, receiver of feedback should bring the context. It is for, therefore, the feedback receiver, and the facilitator will have to, therefore, play this important role of helping the receiver of feedback to understand and interpret the context.
Yes, yes. So, Dr. Rao, just one last question, and then we can have your. So there is this repeated again observation that the feedback from known people could also be biased because they may have differences, and so you mentioned that you accept what you want to accept, and so is there also some minimum number of people you recommend who should give feedback when you're doing this exercise to actually overcome this bias that may happen?
Well, actually, the first question I want to say, all feedback is biased. Every feedback is subjective. Every feedback. I think we
not
should
just
start
bad
by
feedback,
saying,
even
every feedback, yes. As long as people are going to give feedback to other. In fact, I tell people even gods are biased. They like only those bhaktas who worship them, isn't it? Lord Krishna likes his followers, Shiva likes his followers, Allah Mia likes his followers. So what is wrong with people? So I think it is, all feedback is subjective. I think the importance for the feedback receiver is what is it? Is there consistency? Is there something that is appearing to be consistent? Are you an inconsistent person? If you are inconsistent, yeah, I'm behaving differently with different people, and this is what I want to be, fine, no issue. Do you want to be consistent? Do you want to be perceived as a visionary by all? Or it is enough if your boss perceives you as a visionary, but your juniors don't perceive you as a visionary? So it is up to you. So you can say, what do my juniors know? They don't know anything about what vision means. So I am fine with it. No, it's your choice. So context is provided by the receiver. But what we as facilitators do is we keep asking. So I mean, if somebody says, I don't care about my juniors, we say, is that so? Why do you think so? What does it do to you? So these are a little bit of coaching provocations we do. Beyond that, I think it is entirely left for the individual. Regarding the second question, I think this minimum number comes only when you want to treat feedback as objective. Normally, we put a rule. All those who have worked with you for some minimum number of periods, and about maybe period 2 months, 3 months, etc., and who have seen you in operation, and who can comment on the whatever tool that we are using. And even they, if they don't know, if they don't have any knowledge on certain items, let them leave that particular item. That is the freedom that we give. But sometimes, in America, they say minimum 6 people. So, I mean, this is minimum 6, it depends. If you only have 2 people to rate, where is the question of 6 coming actually? Or if you have 25 people to rate, why 6? So I think this is only a statistical kind of a convenience which some people use.
Correct. Yes. Okay.
Now going ahead very quickly, Vishal, I think I will speed up and some whatever I want to say, and then we'll still have time for 20 minutes at least, I hope to. So next 10 minutes I want to conclude. This is a little bit of a research study we had done, and this study was, I think, by about 2010 we collected 360 feedback on about 10,000 senior executives of companies. And what we did was we looked at the data, and we came up with a composite score only on the roles part of it. And we put their scores on some kind of a descending order, and we took the top 300 managers who were rated high by all their juniors, seniors, everyone, and so on. That means they are all the high scorers in 360-degree feedback. It is only to identify 300 people. This is exactly what Zenger and Folkman have done. And that is the methodology we followed. And of those people, we wanted to, once we have identified them, the 360 is thrown, because we can't use the 360. Legally, we can't use. All that we can do is, we say that you are a high scorer. We documented the case studies of these people, their entire life history. Like this book on formative years, I think we try to see what is it, what you went through, what is your career, what are your ambitions, what is your vision, and so on. And that is how this book, 100 Managers in Action, this contains about 105 actually stories, which includes, I think, couple of our alumni also. We discovered they are hardcore networkers. Of course, all these people scored high on vision, culture, technology, systems, etc., because this is what our 360 tool was about. In addition to this, we discovered some 10, actually 12, 13 different qualities. We discovered these people are hardcore networkers. They are great learners. They use every other person as a source of learning. They are achievement-driven people. They take a lot of pleasure in sharing their experience. They are systems-oriented, self-motivated. They started exhibiting leadership from early years, and they are always built on strengths. And they have also a knack of connecting with the outside world. I think those of you, the viewers who are interested, could go through this particular book. And I think this is something which is an interesting study that we have done. We have conducted another study. Now, this is published in Vikalpa by my colleague, my colleague and somebody from Bharat Electronics. This is a study of 302 leaders in Bell. Bell has been doing, and one thing great about Bell is that they used to conduct meticulously follow-up workshops. So after a year of everyone going through, every person has to come for a day's workshop and make a PowerPoint presentation on how that person used whatever he or she has learned from the 360-degree feedback. Now, this survey indicated 92% of those who went through reported positive improvements in their professional life. 81% of them also reported personal life. It impacted their personal life. So it is not that it only helped me to be a better, let us say, manager manufacturing, GM manufacturing, but it also helped me to organize my life better and so on, 81%. Most important thing we found was higher self-awareness and higher self-management. And that is how even I think our introduction to this talk talked about self-management. Improved interpersonal sensitivity, improved communication. I think they were very good in terms of meetings. I think they earlier didn't realize that they were not sensitive to the way they were conducting meetings. They developed juniors better. They became more assertive and so on. I don't want to say with everyone, but these are the general kind of things that we have observed. So when we look at our last, I think it is now 25 years since we started working in TVRLS, and 5 years I think in IIM. In IIM, we had to discontinue between 1990 and 95, 94 when I left. The reason was this was very logistics heavy. You had to get the participant 3 months in advance, and you needed a lot of research staff. At the time, our IT systems were not all that well developed. Today, it is all IT enabled, so you don't need to. So once I started at TVRLS, by now, as I mentioned, we have gone through almost about 25,000 people, about 300-400 companies we have covered. Our commonly observed changes are people started delegating more. Their leadership styles became more developmental. They're more informal, more participative, more open and transparent. They were reading a little more, listening. Communications have gone up. These are, I think, the positive side. Also, our experiences indicate if you have to make it successful, you should use tailor-made tools. We normally ask the company, what is your competency model? Do you have any competencies? Post COVID-19, we, I think, have to incorporate quite a few things. Nowadays, everyone talks of empathy, gratitude, and things of that kind. We tell people, tell us, now, have you incorporated this as a part of your competency model? Do you want it to be, and so on? First round of 360 administration can use elaborate tools. I don't recommend shorter tools, not like the a 5-item questionnaire and things of that kind. I think first time it should be like a diagnosis. When you go for executive health checkup, you spend a whole day, get everything checked. But that's your choice. Initiation sessions for all participants is important. You have to educate people. Otherwise, a lot of misconceptions will be there. Feedback workshops, do not give feedback without preparing them for feedback. We have our own manual. We use it to give 3-day workshops, but today people say, "Arey, I have no time, just do it in 1 day." But sometimes we feel better do it 1 day than spending no time, but at least we insist on a day's workshop. But we don't stop it there. We attach a coach and say, continue to have a dialogue with a coach. 3-day workshops are more useful. It's a good OD tool also. You can use it for. On the negative side of our experiences, we found follow-up is the weakest. I think 70 to 80% of the companies, they think that it is like an attack. You have seen the film is over. After that, forget about it. I think that is where they are not able to leverage the benefits of 360. I think follow-up is important. Individuals may leverage, but company does not have much of an idea. Organizations, organizational data are not put to full use. We give to each company a PowerPoint on the trends. We don't give individuals. I think quite often I normally recommend the top level managers to sit through, analyze, align their L&D and things of that kind. Participants are not actively taking charge of their development. This is one of our big points. This is because KRA orientation is so much. Everyone is driving for targets. No time for development. That is what people will say. ROI remains individualized. And I think it's an intellectual capital builder. Many people don't realize this. Because I mean, most of people know the concept of intellectual capital. Your share, your market value is dependent upon how solid a company you are. And if you do initiatives like this, it adds to your intellectual capital. It's a good tool for leadership building, high energy levels. It creates more conversation points. It enhances your process orientation, and the leadership sensitivity is better. And I have a feeling that employee retention also is likely to go up because people feel my company is interested in development and so on. So in conclusion, if I have to say, I would say that 360 has huge potential, but it remains untapped. It remains untapped. I'm sure IIM Ahmedabad will remember in early part of late 2001, 2002, when we started CBSE schools. I think we used 360 feedback. Even today, some of the headmasters keep writing to me to say this was one of the most useful sessions that they have had. Small things they got inputs, how they are not managing their transportation well, I think meant a lot for them. He has high potential. It is unfortunately untapped. A lot more can be done by HR leaders to help their CEOs, CXOs, and senior management. Sometimes, Vishal, I want to say frankly, and I'm sure in the audience today, there may be a large number of managers. In some cases, I found HR people to be the biggest blocks in 360-degree feedback. Either they are less educated or they play to the tune of the CEO and say, yes, sir, you're right. Now, that is where I want to conclude with the LinkedIn item I have put up about the CEO who wanted his CHRO to call me for a second round of 360-degree feedback. The CHRO delayed for almost a year. He didn't call me. Finally, he said, Professor Rao, I don't believe in 360-degree feedback. My chairman is after me. That is why I'm calling you. This is because most of the managers said after the 360 feedback, the chairman has become bad to worse. He is losing his cool more frequently. So the moment I say one more round, they are saying, for what? First you correct the chairman, then we can think of it. That is what the CHRO told me. Now I will complete the story. I went to this company and asked the CHRO to fix the appointment. And when I met the CEO, first thing he said, he changed his plan to meet me. He said, I was waiting for you. It took 6 months for my CHRO to get you. I'm so happy finally you have come. And my first question to him was, sir, nice of you. I already had an informal chat with some of the managers. To tell you frankly, many of them think that you have come, you started losing your cool more frequently, and they think, why should we go for 360-degree feedback? This was my question. You see, we professor from IIM or consultants don't need to. So I thought he's going to be startled. He laughed. He said, I expected this. That's why I want another round. I am not surprised. Then he told this most interesting thing to me. He said, Professor Rao, after your last 360 feedback, many people called me a person with short fuse, short-tempered. I shared my feedback with the chairman of our group. The chairman said, he told me, We all know that you are impatient, you are short-tempered. You know why we got you here? Because this company needed somebody like you. People have taken life very easily, indiscipline has increased, that's why I got you here. So since then, once in a while, I keep sharing with my chairman, but I am now counting the number of times I lose my cool. And he picked it up from his desk and he showed me that the 8 times when he lost. He said, but Professor Rao, let me ask you, when I took over as the CEO of this company, I discovered there are many unit heads who are all old people, outmoded thinking. I've changed this company, you may have read in newspapers. I've brought in young people. All my unit heads are, most of my unit heads are in their 40s, mid 40s. I'm in my late 50s. They are young people, and I gave them the mandate. And after last 360, my expectation from each one of them is that they should be a lot more competent, lot more result oriented. They should be doing a lot more other things. I agree. I have increased the frequency of meetings. Sometimes I may be losing my temper, but let me tell you, if I lost my cool 10 times before the 360, now it may be only 5 to 6 times, but I still lose. Then the last question he asked me, Professor Rao, I'm in my late 50s, I may have another year or two to go, but these fellows are all in their 40s. Just because I cannot change, or let me accept I have not changed, should I therefore deny an opportunity for the remaining people who are my unit heads a 360-degree feedback? Even if I agree with you, I have not changed. I have come from bad from worse. I want each one of them every 6 months to know how they are faring. And I don't want the data. Vishal, now this is the most unfortunate thing that has happened. Immediately, CHRO told him, you know what he said? Sir, that is why I'm saying let us link our rewards with 360 feedback. Totally out of the blue, CHRO thinks 360 should be linked with incentive system, for which the CEO said, how many times should I tell you, my dear friend, this is the only tool we have which treats individual with respect. You have PMS, you have suggestion schemes, you have quality improvement, you have so many things. For heaven's sake, don't spoil this system. Vishal, the reason why I'm saying this is CHROs, sometimes out of their own ignorance, they simply play to the tune of the CEO. And if CEO says this, I think there is a very big need for CHROs to get educated on 360-degree feedback. I am afraid, barring, I mean, we know a good number of HR leaders who have undertaken 360. I think they don't understand. Therefore, it is important they understand and learn about the 360. I think I'll stop here. I have talked quite a bit about it. Can HR be in the driver's seat? Deep understanding is required. They should experience themselves. I suggest to every CHRO, please go through it yourself before you expose it to others. I think the problem is CHROs are also on a firefighting mode. For them, target achievements have become more important and so on. My final recommendations are build in-house competencies, keep developing and sharpening 360 tools, make development fun, start with the top, most useful for newcomers. Many times we have said, use a shorter tool. Within first 6 months of inducting a newcomer, you should conduct a 360-degree feedback. Don't ever link it with rewards. You can integrate the action plans into PMS and so on. Web-based experience has provided many positive kind of experience and so on. So 360 needs an eye to observe and sensitivity to experience. The impact takes time to get reflected in balance sheet, but they will get reflected. That is how the intellectual capital of a company gets built. These are some of the, I think, work we have done. I think we have a large number of books. Anyone who is interested can get some of these books here. I'll stop here. I think I've taken longer than what I thought I would take. Vishal, I will stop sharing the screen.
Yeah. Thank you, Professor Rao. It was really an enriching and enlightening talk. There are few. Maybe we can take 2 questions. You did answer it in on your last slide, but there is a question which is would it be a good idea to integrate 360-degree feedback with the PMS? You have mentioned in the suggestion, well, do it,
Yeah.
but
Very simple. Uh, I mean, there are many ways in which many companies have done. Anyone who goes through 360 feedback, I normally recommend to companies leave the first time alone. Let the individual do whatever he wants to do. But if you're going to do it as a part of the organizational practice, and even if the first time, you ask the person to incorporate in one of the key areas, one thing I want to do coming out of my 360-degree feedback. It may be a leveraging strength. For example, if somebody may say that I'm very good in systems. So if you are good in systems, please put up one action plan. I'll give you 5% weightage. Okay, at least 5% weightage. Some lesson, or you want to work on one of the areas where you want to improve, or you want to give, you want to participate more in CSR activities so that you want to build the image of whatever you want to do, it doesn't matter. So it's very easy to incorporate into because most companies have KRAs, KPAs, and so on. Make it a part of your performance planning. Anything that can be planned can be done. So that's
I think the suggestions that you have mentioned on the last slide are really very important and useful. So there is another question which is how would we integrate this in a large organization? Is in your experience, if you have a large organization, is there something that you do specifically which should also be kept in mind?
Well, first of all, I think if in a large organization, if you want to include, let us say, I know for sure it becomes very difficult in certain kinds of organizations because we are breaking our heads. For example, my experience with one of the nationalized banks, almost now this date back to 25 years ago. And after that, I never had an opportunity to do it in intensive work, was that they find it I've seen in banks and financial institutions, they find it very difficult to rate their colleagues or bosses on a 6-point scale, anything less than 5.5 or 6. That is how their performance appraisals all are 95% and above. So it becomes a little difficult. If you say, I want to do it, you can only do it by a continuous process, by making it a part of your L&D, learning and development activity, where it is you have a 360 based feedback as a training program. It's conducted internally, tools are developed. These are not used for administrative purposes. Action plans are prepared and things of this kind. It's possible. They all have training departments. I think it is possible because we are talking of creating a culture of openness, transparency. This is a cultural issue. It is possible to use this as a tool to push towards this, what we call as the octopus culture: openness, collaboration, trustworthiness, etc., by doing multiple kind of activities. So I would use the L&D departments to start with. For example, why can't you, like in the banking system, why can't you do it with the probationary officers to begin with? Why can't you do it immediately after you make your first posting, 6 months after you make your first posting? Don't collect the data. The problem with any bank, if I suggest to them, is they would immediately say, no, I'm spending this money, I want the feedback and so on. So I think you need to develop the courage to let go and leave development for people on their own. It's possible even in a large system. Why not? I don't see any reason why you can't do it in a large system. You can do it. You should create a culture. You should train coaches. You should train people. You should first of all understand the potential of this tool. That is what I would say.
Yeah, I think what I'm understanding from your talk, Dr. Rao, is that first of all, this should be looked at as a purely developmental exercise and should not be linked to rewards or that, because then there is that political dynamics that comes into the process, and there has to be this acceptance of feedback has to be driven from the top.
Correct.
And that is how the cultural change and cultural acceptance of this as a tool to develop leadership capabilities would come around.
Absolutely correct.
And
I agree with you.
And that then has to be taken forward, repeated over time to actually establish it as a part of doing things in the organization. Yeah. So there's an importance of hearing from the known people. There is an importance of hearing the unheard from known people. There's an importance of taking it with a mindset of development. There is an importance of developing it as a part of the culture of the organization, looking at it as a developmental tool. And that can really have rich dividends for organization. And there has to be, all these feedback have to be taken in the context that that the organization or individuals are embedded in. And so there has to be, which you very rightly and very insightfully mentioned, that there has to be an emotional preparation for the exercise before people have to taking the feedback may be easy, or giving the feedback, but acceptance and preparation for it is equally important.
Yeah.
So
having said this, only one point, I mean, somebody may therefore say that, look, which means that it is going to be a very planned, etc. exercise. At one point of time, we created a 360 club with a short questionnaire of 25 items and made it available to large number of people. Whosoever wants pays 2,000 rupees and collects the feedback. And we found some organizations benefited quite a bit. It's all mailed. There is nothing to be done. And in fact, we started offering services. Anybody can go through this, and we will even give you a coach for an hour and things like that. So my recommendation here is, if the top management cannot do it for the entire company, will you at least encourage your people? Okay, please, I think invest this much on yourself, a couple of thousands. Now, I don't know if it is feasible to do that with a couple of thousand, but even if it is a small amount like 10,000 rupees, somebody offers, why don't we? I think there are many people who are interested in investing this kind of a thing. I think ultimately the culture of valuing each other should come. Because what is, after all, 360 feedback? I value you. You are a source of my learning. I am learning from you. I want to learn. So if you, the moment you start respecting other people, you see tremendously, interpersonal competence goes up, teamwork goes up. So it comes from the basic respect for each other and treating each other as a source of learning. I mean, these are all tools which facilitate this. If not this, ISAP's BHP or something or the other can be used. That is, they're all possible too. Or many of the IIM's leadership programs. So, I mean, organization-wide, you want to do it, it's wonderful. Top management, it should start. But if some people want to, I think, in fact, I would recommend every organization to create a self-development budget. Use it the way you like. A little budget. Yeah, okay.
Thank you. I think there are lots of thoughts going on in everybody's minds, and there has been excellent participation and attendance. We had about 200 people who joined in, and thank you once again, Dr. Rao. Every time I meet you, I listen to you, I come out only getting inspired. So thank you very much for taking out this time.
Vishal, I must, before you conclude, I must say, I put somewhere, whatever work we are doing is aligned with your treat model. I must mention that task orientation, relationship orientation, empowering, okay, and teamwork. The treat model that you have come up is very much, and in fact, when I read it, I thought that this whole issue of when we started with directive teachers and non-directive teachers. Directive teachers achieve results, non-directive get the happiness. So how do you get happiness with results? I think your treat model in some ways offers that relationships are important. And so that is where I would find it hard not to mention this, because I am also an admirer of this work you have done on
thank you, Dr. Rao. And coming from you, it sort of matters to me all the more. So once again, thank you everybody, and thank you, Dr. Rao, for joining us for this inaugural lecture, and I think it could not have been better. Have a good evening, everybody, and once again, our sincere thanks, Dr. Rao, for doing this.